this gives you a sense of, we want to make sure we apply impact factor to the journal overall and not to individual papers. There's a journal called Acta Crystallographa A, whose impact factor increased from 2.38 to 49.93 in 1 year. You can imagine that editor was thrilled. One article had 5,624 citations. Okay? All of the other articles except one had less than 3 citations. Okay? So this is an extreme example, but it's an example of that skewed data, meaning that an impact factor for a journal doesn't mean every article in it is a really good article. It means that there's some very high impact articles in there that are getting a lot of citations. Similarly, journals that don't have really high impact factors sometimes have very good articles in them, but other articles may not be so good. All right, a few other things from the literature regarding citation rates. There's a study done showing that a correlation exists between the number of authors and the number of times an article is cited. The more authors, the more cited. And that might be, we don't know what that really means. It might mean that more intercollaborative or interdisciplinary work is being done, and it's enabling high-quality work to be done. Open access. We talked about the visibility of articles. If an article can't be found, it can't be cited. So there have been studies that show that articles published in open access journals are, in fact, in most disciplines, but not all disciplines, going to have more citations. And early online publication, which we mentioned as one advantage of a journal, is another way of increasing citations, because the articles are available and accessible for a longer period of time. So let's look at some examples of manipulation of the impact factor. I'm on a listserv for editors. Some journals, when they accept your article, ask you to review previous issues of their journal and cite any additional articles so that they get more citations for their journal. So you should be on the outlook for that, because that's an inappropriate thing to do in asking you to add citations that are just for the purpose of improving the impact factor of a journal. There was another discussion in which someone reported that they received an offer to pay money to authors who cite articles from their journal in order to increase the impact factor. So I don't know how widespread these practices are. I think not very, but people get very desperate at their journals about trying to get their impact factor out, and it's important to be aware of that. This journal, the editors said they debated about removing their notes section in the journal, because the articles in the notes section weren't getting cited as often. But they decided that no, we didn't want to compromise or sacrifice the quality of that content just because of the impact factor. So editors are making decisions about what to publish, in part based on their thinking about how well this article will be cited. Metrics also affect researcher behavior. There was a recent poll in the journal Nature in which they did a survey of many scientists who said that they found that they did their work differently because of the impact factor and the need to get citations on their article. They said that they sometimes felt that they or their colleagues were publishing multiple papers on the same work. They were focusing on quantity rather than quality. They were discouraged from doing even certain types of research that they felt wouldn't be highly cited and therefore wouldn't be worth them publishing. All right, let's look at what impact factors actually are. So in the ISI Journal Citation Report, if we look at all our journals together, and there are 7,334 of them, the highest impact factor is 87.92. Okay? It's a journal, it's a cancer journal. There's Acta Crystallographa is here second. I don't have it shown. The third third journal is the New England Journal of Medicine. It has an impact factor of about 47. And then there's science. Here's a material science journal that's very highly ranked, and a biotechnology journal that's 171 with an impact factor of 8.2. Medical journals really predominate in the very high impact factors. And if you look at these two areas down here, this is number 5. There are, let's see if I added this up. No. There are about 4,000 journals that have an impact factor between 5 and 1. All right, so we've got 4,000 journals here. We have less than 200 journals here. So you can see that the majority of journals have relatively low impact factors. And there's another about 3,000 journals that have an impact factor of less than 1. So that helps put in perspective the relative numbers that these journals have. As an illustration of citation rates differing by discipline, here's the discipline of composite science. There's 22 journals in it. And they go from about 3 as the highest impact factor, close to 0. And you can see that the median impact factor is about 0.7, which is half that in the environmental science journals. Now you'll notice that in composite science, all right, we have a smaller audience, fewer journals, but then also only 15 citations per article average out, whereas in environmental science, they have more citations per article. So it's difficult to compare the impact factor between one discipline and another because the size of the audience differs and the citation practices within a particular field also can differ. So my purpose of sharing this information is to simply say we need to keep the impact factor in perspective. There's a lot of things that affect it. There's a lot of people trying to leverage the impact factor to their advantage. Now we have to understand that and look at all aspects of the quality of a journal when deciding where to publish your work. Now I think we're about ready to take a break, but let me mention one other citation index. The Synego company has a website and a citation. They also rank journals by citations, and they publish what's called the SJR, or Synego Journal Ranking. And this is a company that is emerging as a competitor with the impact factor. Because of some of the problems that I've raised with the impact factor, there's a lot of competition out there for coming up with numbers that do a better job of evaluating journal quality, of evaluating the quality of individual papers and scientists. So SJR is a competitor. Their ranking is based on the Scopus database, and they rank journals in a slightly different way, based on a weighted average of the last 2 years. They calculate also what's called an H-index, which is thought to do a good job of quantifying not only productivity, but not only impact, but productivity. You can get more information on how these are calculated by going to their website. Now, one other thing that Synego does that I think is pretty cool and that you might enjoy looking at is they show co-citations between journals in different disciplines. And as a multidisciplinary unit here in the Institute, it might be of a lot of interest to people to look at which disciplines here in Egypt, for example, and these are the data for Egypt for 2008-2009, which disciplines are citing each other and how is that changing over time. So this is a rather innovative way that they're using their citation data to give us some new information about how scientists are working together, how disciplines are evolving, which disciplines are growing in strength, and how multidisciplinary work is emerging. For all their popularity, this editor of Nature says, citation-based metrics share some weakness when it comes to evaluating individual researchers. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't aim for the highest quality journal, and maybe even the highest impact factor don't want to underestimate the quality of our own paper, even if it's published in a journal with a lower impact factor. There are many other aspects for good quality publications and good quality journals to consider. I've already talked about open access journals, which is a very strong trend, and I think I alerted you yesterday there are some low-quality open access journals out there, but open access is an important way to increase the visibility of your paper. So in selecting a journal, we want to again remember that we're publishing because it's part of our job, but we also want to publish to communicate. And in considering the aims and scope of a journal, its target audience, the services that it offers, whether it costs money, and importantly, its prestige and quality. We want to keep all of those things in mind when deciding which journal to publish our manuscript in. So thank you, and we'll take a break, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a few questions.
Questions from anybody in the audience?
كم سؤال قبل ما ناخد بريك؟ مفيش أسئلة؟